All right, so taking a look here at the Introduction to Ecology and Ecosystems. So this is an extension from, well, it would have started early on, but in grade 7 you did interactions in ecosystems, and then later on you have done some environmental chemistry. So some of this relates, in biological diversity in grade 9. So these are relating back to those concepts. So if we take a look at the curriculum, we're going to be looking at energy flow in the biosphere. So this idea of some energy obviously coming in from the sun and then obviously being lost. And this word lost means it doesn't actually go anywhere, but is it converted into the same or useful energy? So usually lost as thermal energy. So we'll be looking at that. Also discussing abiotic and biotic characteristics. So again, something that hopefully has scaffolded from grade 7 and 9. And then species, population, community, and ecosystem, just looking at how these relate and kind of what defines each of these roles or descriptors in ecology. And then, of course, looking at the fact that all matter on Earth stays on Earth, so it just simply cycles. So we're going to introduce this idea of cycling as was reviewed from grade 10. So taking a look then at some definitions. So in biology, we are looking at the study of life, right? So bios means life. Ecology is specifically the study of the relationship between the living and the non-living components of an environment. So looking at the abiotic and biotic components as they relate to each other. Biotic means living. Abiotic means non-living. So again, just terms that hopefully are not new to you. Here, if we look at the hierarchy of how it all works, so studying ecology is studying environmental systems. So here you can see the biosphere. This would be all areas on Earth that have life. So in the biosphere, you might have it in the water, which is the hydrosphere. So anywhere that there's life in the water is going to be considered the biosphere. In the air, it would be in the atmosphere, and on land, it would be the lithosphere. So all of those areas have life on them at some form, and so wherever that life is living is considered part of the biosphere. Within a smaller kind of, as you can see here, as we go into a smaller kind of subsection, this is the ecosystem. So in this picture here, you can see the sunlight is obviously providing energy, and then you can see all types of living and non-living things in that ecosystem. Community then is only the living portion. So here you can see the duck and the frog and the turtle and the grasses and the bunny. So this would be the living portion, or living what we call populations. Population then by definition is a group of the same species that can interbreed, but also in the same area at the same time. So this group of fish are living in this lake, and so they are considered a population. The organism itself then might be a species. So it would be, in this case, just a single organism. If we define species, it means that it can interbreed to produce viable, fertile offspring. And here are the definitions, just as we just saw. So organism is an individual form of life. Species by definition is a group of organisms that are capable of interbreeding. And again, they have to be able to produce fertile offspring. Population, again, same species, but in the same area at the same time. And community is all the living portions that are in that area. Here, the ecosystem, you can see we add another layer, not just living, the biotic, but also the abiotic and how it interacts. Biosphere, again, is that narrow zone of Earth where life is found. And then this definition here is one hopefully you remember from grade 9, biodiversity, or what we call biological diversity, just specifically speaking about the number and variety of species in an ecosystem. So if you compare, for example, a rainforest, it has high biodiversity as compared to a barren landscape where there's not very much life. If you look at these slides here that have the pink and then they have IB, these are IB curricular targets, so you're welcome to check them out. There's some really good information on them, but these go a little bit beyond our scope. And so here you can see an example of a species. We do talk about species, so this might be helpful to you. This is a liger. It is a male lion and a female tiger have produced this. However, they cannot produce their own offspring, and so that is a hybrid, right? So species have to be able to produce their own fertile offspring, and so this would be not a version of that definition of species. Again, this is in the IB category, so you can see the hybrids that were given there. And then again, just a few extra terms for the IB curriculum. If you continue in this, again, just follows in the textbook in chapter 1. I do like to have a little textbook reference. So here's kind of what they talk about in the textbook. It's called dynamic, which refers to the changing idea, and then equilibrium, so staying the same. So whenever we talk about ecosystems, there very often are fluxes or changes in the ecosystem. And the goal of the ecosystem, just as the goal of the human body, right, is to always to reach equilibrium. So always to come back to kind of a balanced state. So it says here, dynamic equilibrium refers to the idea that there are constant changes occurring on Earth, but components will adjust to to the changes to maintain balance and not disrupt the entire system. So there are always checks and balances. And as you can see in this example here, it shows us that this truck, so as this truck is kind of obviously decomposing, kind of breaking down, that environment is going to change. But the goal of the environment is always to kind of just absorb that change and eventually come back to that balance. Here, they're also talking about energy flowing and matter cycling. So as we look here, all the components of this truck are going to stay here, right? Eventually they'll be broken down into the iron atoms, and eventually everything will be returned to the soil. So just a reminder that the biosphere is a closed system. So although there is energy flowing through it, all the stuff, all the matter that's ever on Earth will always be on Earth. So energy can pass in and out, but matter is only going to cycle. And that is referenced there by that little explanation. This one, again, just another, review of what you've already hopefully been taught. Biological diversity, again, the number and variety of species. So when you lose a species, which we're going to look at some definitions here in a moment, it can cause a collapse in a food chain. So when there's too much stress, the ecosystem can't come back or get back into equilibrium, and that obviously causes a great deal of harm. A healthier ecosystem has more diversity. So, for example, if there's many different rodents or many different food types that can be eaten by a predator, that gives them more options if something happens to one of the prey species. And so healthier ecosystems tend to have more diversity because they can withstand change. And so that's with the greater number or variety of species, there's more options for organisms to eat and still pass on energy and survive. The key terms that I was just talking to you about here, so extinct, you are asked to know what that word means. It means that the species is no longer present on Earth. Endangered means that it's close to extinction. Extirpated means that it might be extinct from an area, but not all areas. So it's somewhere, but it's no longer in an area that it was. So it's extinct from an area. That word extirpated might be new to you. Threatened, this one means they're likely to become endangered if factors aren't changed. And of special concern is that their numbers are at risk because of low or declining numbers. So if you've ever been to the zoo, you've seen these terms. And again, IB curriculum at the very end. So that is just to wrap up the first set of notes.